Hello everyone! The purpose for my vlog today is to share my response to the ongoing discussion about cued speech at the Illinois State School for the Deaf. Cued speech, in short, is an educational aid that is meant to help lip reading in academic situations regarding to deaf students. Now, one of my friends who graduated from Illinois School for the Deaf made a comment that cued speech should be continued to be used at the school because it serves as a recruiting method for prospective students. Reason is, students are fascinated by the visual aid of cued speech, which draws them into the school, but after school hours in the cafeteria and such, they're acclimated with ASL and will eventually stick with signing. With all of the different opinions being shared on the topic, it's my personal opinion that we've missed some key points regarding the issue. Particularly, there are two main points I want to call out. First of all, I want to emphasize the severity of the issue of hearing educators making academic decisions on behalf of the deaf population. This has happened all across time, all across nation, and this sickens me. Now, Kevin Smith, this one's for you. How would you feel if, as a white man, I wrote the curriculum for African American education, that despite our cultural differences, I know what's right for the black community? My guess is you wouldn't appreciate that. As a matter of fact, society as a whole would reject that completely. The same is true for other ethnicities and minorities. So why is that common courtesy and respect not reciprocated within the deaf community? We see that marginalized behavior time and time again. It's a constant battle with hearing professionals making tight-lipped decisions behind closed doors, not involving or consulting a member of the deaf community first. Now, despite the statistics having proved cued speech to be ineffective, it's still in place, and we know the success rate for ASL is impactful and tremendous, but what this comes down to is language oppression. Now, on to my second point. Another point worth emphasizing is that in ASL, along with any other language, has two separate components of language. This is something that I feel a lot of people out there don't recognize or realize. For example, when comparing ASL and English side by side, we see that both languages are comprised of two categories of what's known as academic and social language. Academic language is a linguistic structure that's used particularly within the classroom. It's structured, it's grammatically correct, it's formal. Social language, on the other hand, is seen outside of the classroom, like in dorms, in playgrounds, in the cafeteria, etc. Now, particularly within English, academic language is easily identified by its structure and tone in language that's used in the classroom. How one speaks inside and outside of the classroom is very distinct. Again, in English, we see that social language taking place in the form of texting and writing, Facebook messaging, daily conversations is just part of our natural expressions. Now, as far as social language in ASL, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. This takes place within the cafeteria, after hours, and such. However, when it comes to academic ASL, do we really have a structurally based language for an education setting in deaf programs? The answer is no. No, there's not. And I would argue that only 2 to 3 schools across the nation have what I call academic ASL, let alone even offering ASL courses. Now, some of you may be thinking academic ASL, well, I've never heard of such a thing. But let me explain the rules pertaining to academic language. Many people take it upon themselves to learn ASL, but they aren't fluent. They're not native signers, and you can easily tell so by all of the mistakes and the rules that they don't follow within the language. ASL has strict palm orientation and number rules alike. If I'm talking about numbers as they relate to objects, for example, if I'm saying I have 4 cars, my palm would face my body, not outward. That rule is just as valid as any grammatical rule in English. If I'm talking about phone numbers, my palm would then face outward to better clarify the shapes of my hands. That is also a rule. The way information is traded amongst one another has a grammatical structure that in and of its own right has a place in language. If we're talking about football scores, it is unnatural to say that a 49-0 score would be signed in the same spatial location of the body. If a team has badly lost a game, 49 is going to be up high in the spatial location to signify beating a number 0 signed lower in the spatial location. More than that, facial grammar is also a part of ASL as well. If you're speaking about an intense football score, 49-0, and you have a blank expression on your face, you're not portraying the intensity of the score, the win for the team. It would be appropriate to have a facial expression of being shocked or excited or surprised when talking about that massive win. Also in ASL, we see expressive and receptive skills. And what that means is if I were to take a video of other people signing and put them in front of my students who have been seeing me sign for a month or two, they're used to my signing style and they would be shocked to be looking at a person's different style in another video. This whole aspect of receptive skills runs deep in academic ASL. But going back to English academic language, it's vastly structured for English-speaking students. They're very familiar with textbook language and such. But to keep it concise, what I'm really saying is that this is a problem. It's a problem that cued speech and seeing essential English is implemented in deaf education, and it's a problem because hearing people are making those decisions. They need to be consulting with the deaf community, the deaf students, the deaf population, and asking them what's best for them. Because it's been proven that ASL is the best option. So they should be taking a look at that and respecting, supporting, and encouraging ASL as an academic investment. Parents often feel inferior to ASL and they want to oppress the language and replace it with oralism. A good example of this happened to me last week at a conference where a woman told me that ASL was used as a crutch. It's not a real language, and that is nonsense. My point is that with academic ASL, it needs to be on par with academic English. It doesn't matter the background of the child. The point is that the child is deaf, and the deaf child needs formal education. By offering formal education by means of academic ASL, we can better bridge the gap between the English language and ASL and make the transition between those two languages easier. We have seen it time and time again that cued speech is a concept that falls under the English language. It's a monolingual approach to education. It's not a language, it's just a tool. And while there may be some benefits to us, ASL will always triumph. For as long as we have deaf children, we will always have ASL, and that's forever. Those who are raised in an oral institution grow up to be regretful of their upbringing and wish that they had been introduced to ASL long ago. Kevin, you're lucky. You're so blessed to have been raised in the deaf school and to be raised where you had full access to ASL and that's part of your identity. I'm lucky too, but so many of us don't have that opportunity. I think we need to look at the language. I think the Illinois School for the Deaf needs to think twice and redirect their focus to ASL. And that goes for deaf schools across the nation. Reconsider academic ASL. I will say the concept is growing slowly but surely. And I know that my ramblings are long here, but this needs to be addressed. ASL is a very sophisticated language. It's superior to English even. In ASL, I can tell 2 stories at the same time with both of my hands. You can't do that in English. Where English fails, and it does because even interpreters can't keep up, ASL thrives. May this discussion continue. Thank you.